The Ad hoc Committee on Gang Violence and Youth Development special meeting will now come to order. We'll begin by taking items in the order of item number 4 first.
Item number 4, CAO and Board of Police Commissioners reports relative to grant funding in the amount of $428,125 for the 2008-09 Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act program and related matters.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay. Can you brief the committee on what the JJCPA funds are used for?
Sir, Captain Fabian Lizarraga from Commanding Officer of Juvenile Division. The JJCPA grants are being used in the Safe Passages program throughout the city. The money is allotted or broken down by our geographic bureaus, and they in turn enforce truancy and curfew laws around sites designated by the probation department in order to ensure that these areas are as crime-free as possible. Also, out of that, there is money that is allocated. I believe it's $120,000 for the Explorer program out of that.
Okay. Do any of you attend any of the coordinating council meetings, the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council meetings?
Out of my division, D3 Alex Rosales does. He's on vacation right now, so he's not here.
But some people wave their hands back here as well.
Yes, sir. Detective Coffey.
Come forward, grab a mic. Thank you.
Detective Kevin Coffey, D3 Juvenile Division. Whenever there's a meeting and if Detective Rosales is on a vacation day, I go on his behalf along with Wanda Bell from behind from our Fiscal Operations Division.
Okay. Do you have an understanding or do you know how the coordinating council allocates its funding, determines how to allocate the funding?
I think Wanda Bell would she'd be best to answer that question there. We just get told how much money is allocated to the department.
Okay.
Wanda Bell, LAPD Fiscal Operations Division. They meet and discuss the funds that they have available, the programs that they want to fund out of that program, and come to a consensus between all of the stakeholders as to how much, depending on the funds that's available, how they'll be distributed.
Okay, when you say they meet, who's the they?
The County of Los Angeles leads, Probation Department leads the committee, along with members of, the school board, the City of Los Angeles, the county, other agencies that are stakeholders in the program.
Now, of the agencies and organizations that are represented in the room, are there some that are and are not voting members to determine this funding?
I believe there's voting members from, at least one voting member from all of the different organizations to determine the funding.
All right.
But on the voting member side, as the police department, we have no involvement with the amount of funds that's distributed to us. We just vote yes or no on certain events that they have, but nothing to do with the funding. That's determined by the probation department.
So it's your understanding that the probation department controls the funds?
Correct.
And do you know what the source of these funds are? Are they federal funds, state funds?
They're state COPS funds. I'm sorry, no, they're the state of California pass-through funds. It comes out of their budget. This year, I'm not sure because the state of California had some funding problems, and I believe that the County of Los Angeles is actually going to fund the program.
Okay. So are these or are these not Shift Cardenas funds?
They are.
Okay. All right. I want to remind all of the city departments that spend time in those meetings, as long as you're there, you have a responsibility and the ability to give your input, and also the voting members determine what happens with those funds, not the probation department. Because when I wrote that legislation, because it was my legislation, I'm the Cardenas and the Shift Cardenas, Shift was the COPS money. which the year that we wrote it was $121 million of COPS money. And then what I did for the first time is I implemented the juvenile justice funds, which is $121 million. And when it came down to the counties, like the County of Los Angeles, the first year was almost exactly $30 million. It came down to the county level for the coordinating council in their meetings to determine how they're going to implement those funds. It was never the intent of the legislature to have the probation departments at the local level be the ones to determine how the funding goes. It was supposed to be a collaborative, collective effort of all the voting members. So if you want to go ahead and ask somebody else, go ahead. But if they're going to be honest with you, they're going to tell you, go ask former Assemblyman Cardenas. He wrote the legislation. I wrote the legislation. And all too often throughout the state of California, and the County of Los Angeles is no exception, people have been led to believe that there's this black hole called the County Probation Department in every county in the state, and what they do is they submit a proposal to the voting members. It's not the way it's supposed to be. It was written specifically so that the voting members can deliberate, they can argue, they can fist fight, however they want to do it at the local level. They would determine how to distribute their per capita allotted dollars to their jurisdiction, in this case, a county. It doesn't mean that the actual county controls the money, but because then Governor Gray Davis insisted that we have a local mechanism in which to utilize in order to determine the expenditures, it was determined that the local coordinating council, because they already pre-existed before the legislation was passed, that that would be the venue in which the voting body of that local venue would determine how to spend the money. And what I don't understand is how the city of Los Angeles, we have item number 3, it points out that about $2 million or so actually get allotted for direct expenditure for the city of Los Angeles. When the city of Los Angeles is, using round figures, the city of Los Angeles is about 1/10 or 12%, somewhere in there, of the entire state population. So out of $120 million, we should be getting some decent portion thereof of $12 million for direct expenditure by our organizations within our city. Granted, we don't do probation department work within the city, so obviously if we're going to incorporate some of our activities within the city limits, then the probation department would get some portion of that $12 million. But it was never designed for a city of Los Angeles like us, the largest city in the state, to just be dealing with direct expenditure of $2-3 million at the most. That was not the intent of the legislature. And I can guarantee you the author of the bill, that was never his intent. So don't feel too bad, because unfortunately I've seen this over and over and over again, where the implementation of something is skewed by the politics of a particular powerful entity, and all of a sudden they misinterpret or reinterpret, and all of a sudden it gravitates toward favoring them. And in this case, the biggest benefactors of the Schiff Cardenas Act in the state of California has been county probation departments. And every year they find ways to deplete the resources going to other entities within those counties. And then the vast majority ends up going back to the county departments. Because I haven't heard of the County of Los Angeles giving back any of this money. And this has now been implemented for 8 years. So when we see less and less money going to our third-party providers like not-for-profits and or the city of Los Angeles all of a sudden being confined to only having direct control of a couple $1 million, that means the probation department is actually expending the rest. And they never give any of the money back, not that I'm aware of. So please understand that. Please understand that. As a member of the council now, my title has changed. I don't have voting authority in that room. But it's my understanding that the mayor's office has a vote in that coordinating council. Is that the case?
I believe they do.
Yeah.
along with the police department. I can also share with you, though, sir, that at least we know we have a very strong presence. We're one of the few entities that does a formal presentation in front of the board. We've been part of that for the last 4.5 years because each year they've talked about reducing the amount of funds coming to the police department. And we've been able to show the reduction of crime in and around JJCPA sites and the correlation with our funding of these safe streets, safe zones, safe passages areas. So at least we've been able to maintain where they've taken away from others. So at least as far as that's concerned, we put a strong showing up for that.
I appreciate that, but basically it's not a fair fight. You're having to fight with county probation when they're claiming that they're the dictators of what the proposal is that you're going to submit to the state of California. And that was never the intent. The intent was that the voting body would mix and match their ideals and efforts, et cetera, and they would all work together and collaborate on what is the best way for them to expend per capita dollars. So when you have to fight for them not reducing the amount of dollars, in this case going to the LA Police Department, if they do reduce it, guess where the money goes? It's not that the money does. Say in a previous year you received $750,000, and all of a sudden they want to reduce you to $500,000 the next year. That $250,000 doesn't remain with the state of California. It very likely ends up in some kind of county expenditure, not the city of Los Angeles, not the police department, not children, youth, and their families, et cetera. It very likely ends up being expended on salaries directly to people who work for the probation department. So next time they try to reduce your funds, the question you need to ask is, why are you reducing the funds? Where is it going? We're getting per capita dollars from the state of California.
Makes sense. I've got a question for you, sir.
Sure.
I'll come straight out and be honest with you. If this comes up next time, would we be able to invite you to a meeting with the probation department? And because I think you could have some strength with us to help support, to try and drive for.
Absolutely.
That would be
I'll be more than happy. Be more than happy to do that. I've been dying for the opportunity. Like I said, I don't have a position. The City Council of Los Angeles doesn't send a voting member or doesn't send a representative who's actually a voting member of that body. We're in item 4. We started with item 4. So therefore, I can be there as a witness, to testify or what have you. I'd be more than happy to do that. I would love to receive questions from people who want to tell me how to interpret the law that I wrote. I think that would be a lot of fun. Very disappointing, though, so far.
That's what we did in council this morning with the city charter language.
There you go.
I wrote that. They were trying to tell me what
Yeah.
I was thinking when I wrote that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
What was I thinking when I wrote that?
When it comes to the Explorer program, what are the requirements for the youth to be involved in the Explorer program?
As far as the Explorer program is concerned, we've actually changed a lot of our focus. The Explorer program, like the Los Angeles Police Department, no longer has the same look and feel as it did back in the 60s and 70s. We realize that a lot of the youth that are involved in our Explorer program in the city of Los Angeles come from disadvantaged areas. A large amount of our Explorer program today has a strong diversity that matches our communities. And with that, you have a lot of youth that don't come from a background that has the funds able to pay for their uniforms, which gets very expensive. We now allow the Explorers to come into the program on case-by-case basis with less than a C average, which never had happened before. What we do, though, is we take a look at these kids and we basically put them on, quote-unquote, a probation that says, if you want to be part of this program, this is what you have to do, and you have to work with us to help bring you up to speed in your academics. We also partner now more than ever with our community partners, especially in our 19 areas, soon to be 21, community partnerships with our neighborhood groups to work with these youth as far as their academics is very strong. We've partnered with several programs that are within our high schools and some of our middle schools called the Police Magnet Program. And of course, with that, we're seeing a strong increase in their academics, because if we can convert these young men and women into law enforcement officers and civilian personnel, and even if that doesn't happen, if we can make them productive members of our society, we've won. So we're reaching out more than ever into our communities. We have some divisions. Newton Division is one. They have standing room only at their meetings. They don't have enough room to bring in the Explorers just because we don't receive any funding to really run the Explorer programs in the divisions. We only use the money to fund the academies. So that's always been one of the challenges with our police department, is that we're a very strong member of the city as providing youth services, but we don't get any funding for that outside of the 120 for the academy. So our strength has to be in the partnership with our fellow community departments. CDD, we're trying to. Parks and Recs are things we're starting to look at now because the money just isn't there like it used to be potentially.
So basically, the criteria for the kids to join is you're not looking so much at where they've been or what they've done. You're looking at whether or not they're committed to commencing a relationship with the Explorers. Correct.
Again, it's like we talked about the grades, where people that used to become the Explorers truly came into the job, into the event, because it was a potential career choice. Now, the sad part is a lot of these youth are becoming in the Explorer program because it's a safe venue, because they're living in parts of the community that are very violent. Even though we've had strong crime reduction areas, being involved in a program that doesn't have gang members, that you don't have to have a fear of being shot or being sold drugs in the street, or be scared because of a color of the shirt that you're wearing, to be part of something that is totally void of all those things, has become really a venue for these young men and women to come into today.
Okay. So there's no minimum criteria. It's basically if you come across them and or the dialogue commences and they want to be a part of the program, then they're welcomed, and then therefore the commitment and the standards begin.
Yes, sir. And then we also have other programs, because the Explorer program isn't for all individuals, just like the police department isn't a job for everyone that wants to come in the city of Los Angeles. And we'll have some young men and women that do have criminal backgrounds, that have unfortunately gone down the wrong road or been exposed to that. They're on probation or have a variety of other issues that might impact them. So we have other programs that we direct them into. We have our Juvenile Impact program, which are involving youth that are truly going down the wrong side of the road. We partner that with probation, with kids that might be defiant to their folks or staying out past curfew and need more of that focused guidance. And we also have our Jeopardy programs that sometimes are more sports-related and not a law enforcement type program. We've realized, just like everything else, and we've had to create these different types of menus. It's almost like a Chinese menu. You try to pick and have a kid have an opportunity to go someplace where he or she might be more comfortable, but providing that safe and secure environment.
Now, when it comes to the JJCPA money, the $428,000 that we're speaking of at the moment, how many high-risk or high-need youth are you serving on an annual basis, roughly?
Well, sir, I don't have those exact numbers. I can tell you that what happens on a lot of our funds is we use it for crime suppression and crime prevention. So, for instance, when you hear the term safe passages, of course, we have our sites that have been allocated by the probation department. And then what we will do with those sites is we will divide them up. There's a total of 48 sites that are allocated by the probation department to us. Majority of them are high schools, some are middle schools. A few are some other locations that they have designated. And say we have a school that's off of Figueroa. We realize that going to school or going from school home, they might end up going down in an area that has heavy prostitution activity. It's not a fun environment to have some young man or woman to walk past prostitutes in the street. So we'll use law enforcement officers to patrol that corridor, then making up the safe passage for those young kids going to or from. So we could be doing prostitution enforcement. We could be doing narcotics enforcement along that passage. We could also be writing truancy citations during the day. It's very important for us to keep those sites secure. And if we go back in time, the probation department selected a lot of these JJCPA sites because of the amount of kids that are on probation at these schools. Because they realize that the amount of kids on probation, if they don't have that safe and secure environment outside the school, they get driven back into gangs and other relations. That is not good for the child. So that's where we really try to work on that area, the parks, the schools, the streets, truancy and curfew enforcement also in the evening hours.
So Safe Passages is not run by LAPD. You're a complementary component of Safe Passages.
Correct. And that term as safe passages was really coined back with the probation department, the sheriff's department. They were the ones that started to use that term. And a lot of agencies started going with that same term, and so we've adopted it also. Because in essence, that's what it is. We would not just enforce juvenile-related issues, we would also enforce adult crimes that would prey on youth that are around the area.
So the funding, for example, for safe passages is spread across a 12-month basis or the months of the year in the fiscal year that the kids are in school.
Correct. But that's usually year-round because
Yeah,
we
a
have
lot of
year-round
schools are
schools,
year-round.
even though we're changing back to a lot of our schools throughout, but it's used usually throughout. We also have summer funds.
Okay.
Probation Department recognized in our parks that we have to keep them safe, so then they've actually allowed us to use the funds to patrol parks and such.
Is the department starting to strategize how to shift the manpower or what have you? Because it's my understanding that safe passages is being phased out, and come July 1st, the formal safe passages around most of these schools is no longer going to be a formal component. Obviously, activities can continue, components can continue to keep the community safe or what have you, but it's my understanding that safe passages come January 1st is no longer going to exist the way it existed in the past.
I don't have an answer to that because my partner, who is the predominant focus on that, is not here, so unless one of the gentlemen.
There's funding that's been associated for this fiscal year and for the next fiscal year. So I'm not aware that it's been reduced or cut.
Okay. All right, well, we'll stick around because I think on item 3 we're going to get to that. Okay.
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference in terminology with safe passage. I think when you talk about safe passage, you're talking about it in terms of law enforcement
Correct.
making the passage safe.
Correct.
Correct. Safer for the kids to walk through. In our prevention and intervention terminology, we consider safe passage to actually be real people sort of escorting kids to and from school, no matter what area they're going through, to keep them safe from, particularly from harassment and being preyed on by gang members. So it's very different. And in your terminology of safe passage, your officers, there might not even be any officers during that time to and from school. What it seems to me your goal is to, again, try to rid that passage of crime.
Correct.
Or reduce it.
Correct.
So, but that could happen any time of the day.
Correct.
It doesn't, in fact, probably doesn't happen exactly when kids are walking to and from school.
Well, they do. Every division sets up their own program. They work with
Right.
the probation department.
Right.
And they designate when the higher crime rates are and when the victimization occurs. And then they'll juggle their time.
But if there's higher prostitution, for instance,
Oh, absolutely.
Friday night,
Yes.
but it's still, they still hang around in that area, you're attempting to reduce.
In general, around that
In
area.
general,
We'll
around that
enforce
area.
liquor store crimes
Right.
that would be there.
Right. So
just
it's
in
kind of
general.
it's a completely different usage of the word
Yeah.
safe passage.
And I started off that conversation. I mentioned that safe passages has different terminology
Right.
in different organizations.
Right.
Sheriff's departments uses it the
Right.
same as we do, as we call it, just making a safe and secure passage for
Right.
the child. But you're right.
Right, and I hopefully we're going to have some clarification when we get to that item. But my fear is the funding for the safe passage that I'm interested in, of the actually real people, not that you guys aren't real people, but organizations actually escorting kids to and from school. That's what I'm afraid the funding is coming to an end. In terms of your grants to reinforce your strategy of safe passageways, I'm not sure if that funding is in jeopardy.
That's what I think, because none of us are aware of that, so that's probably the case.
Right.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. And I misspoke. That's item number 2 when we get to the broader issues of safe passages. Any more questions?
Just a clarification on Explore program. So if someone is on probation, they're not eligible for?
Generally, they are
Or-
not. And,
Okay.
and what's happened now is that we used to have a very black and white issue that if you fit the certain criteria, that you weren't allowed, but that's changed. And unfortunately, they don't have someone here from the Explorer program to answer those direct questions. But I know I was part of it before I did the transition over to Chief Paysinger's office, is that more than ever, they are looking more at the child as an individual and not just at these black and white issues. We're looking at children before where they weren't allowing certain issues that
Right.
would happen
And
more accommodating.
Do
today.
we have, what's the word I'm looking for? Do we have statistics or results based on the Explorer program? Have we tracked these kids to find out?
As far if they're reoffending or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, that's the Office of Operation under Chief Pacinger's office, and there was a miscommunication.
Again, because I think
they
that's
should have
where
been
we're
here.
all going in the city, is much more accountability of every
Correct.
program. I mean, we need to know, has it worked? And the only way we're going to be able to figure out how it's working, we got to track these kids. They were this, they came into the Explorer program, and now where are they? What's happened to them? And we've got to start at least documenting. We've got to keep records. And that's how we're going to move forward in the city with any kind of funding, I think. And
Right.
you know, I think it's a program worth funding, but
Right.
we've got to do better on actually finding out, did it work? Did it keep kids who were at risk from, you know, kind of going into that life of crime?
And
Yes.
I think initially that the Explorer program wasn't intended to be, you know, a place where you're rehabilitated. It was generally
Right.
a place for kids who were already on the right track, showed an interest, and that's where they went.
Right.
And that's still the type of kids that we're
It's not,
we're
you're
drawing.
not looking for kids at risk.
But on the other hand, some of our programs that we've had, like the Juvenile Impact Program, that boot camp, we've used as a springboard now for successful completion of that into the Explorer program, into doing it. Do we have a formal tracking system for that? No. We never have. But
You should think about doing it.
yeah, it's a good idea. I think from my own knowledge and having worked with them a lot over the years, very rarely do we have a problem with our kids. Generally, when the kids transition out, they transition out because of age. At 21, they're no longer eligible to be in the program, and they have to move.
Yeah, but I mean, the concept is still, I mean, just even the way it's explained now, I mean, it could be a kid who is at risk, who, again, wants to be there because they don't like being home,
They
and
don't like the alternative.
they don't like the
No.
alternative, and if it wasn't for the Explorer program, they very well might be sucked into the gang life, which is a very persuasive recruitment effort on our kids. So,
At my last station in 77, every child that was in that program could be considered to be at risk.
Okay, that's
But-
what
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Prop A had passed, and there might still be a hope that it does pass, I always talked in terms of these programs being eligible to be funded by that money, based on, you know, our criteria and our statistics and our needs assessment of a particular community. But I think the kids in Explorers would definitely fall under that category. This is a program that has proven results, but that's what we'd like to see more of, to keep a kid from being sucked into the gang life. And I think it falls into that category.
Yes.
And of course, you know what I feel? I feel like every child in Los Angeles is at risk. That's how I feel, no matter where they live. So there,
At risk of something.
at risk, yeah, at risk for something.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you.
Let me just ask one question. What would it take to start getting stats for the Explorer program?
Well, a lot of different. You mean as far as?
Track results, tracking kids who've been in the
Well, that's
program.
not- I don't think that's very hard, actually, in the sense that we do track a lot of things. I mean, we could tell you exactly how many kids we've had in the program. We could tell you who's been there for how long and how long they've stayed. You know, some kids, you know, they run, the interest dies out and they move on to something else. We could probably tell you relatively quickly who left for disciplinary reasons and who left for just because they lost interest in the program, and then how many actually stayed until they were 21. You know, you start at 14. That's when we start this particular program, and they go to 21. To say that every single one of them stays till they're 21, that's not the case. But most transition out sometime in their high school years as they go to work, begin athletics in high school or other things that take their time and that sort of thing. But in my experience, I haven't had to kick out very many kids in a program in my 8 years as being a command officer, and most of those times spent in a station.
Well, Also, on that note, Janice, the JJCPA funding does require that there be feedback and then the information go back to the state of California from the local counties. So,
And we'll do a better job. I'm relatively new in this assignment and not aware of it. Well, I'll take a look at all of the advice that you gave as far as the grant goes and how that is processed and what our obligation is. Our representative to that, I haven't had an opportunity to sit down with and to talk to regarding their role and how they see their role. And we'll see what we can do as far as strengthening the city's position in that process.
okay. Thank you. And are there any public comments on item number 4? I don't see any public comment cards before me.
Can I
Come
just
forward.
give you one last comment?
Sure.
I wanna
Come
make
to the
sure-
mic. Go ahead.
Make sure that you are aware. The money that we get from Schiff Cardenas only pays for the equipment for their uniforms when they go through the academy. Other than that, it doesn't go for anything else. And the Los Angeles Police Department doesn't receive any funding for youth programming. We have to basically go out begging for folks to pay for these youth programs and trying to partner with other city departments, which gets to be challenging sometimes. So other than that, everyone turns to the police department for youth programs because of the nature, but there's no funding. They have to use police officers to staff these programs, which becomes very difficult. You asked about the tracking, and they've looked at that over time, but you have to take police officers out of the field to do these types of things, and then we take them off the streets. So that's,
Well, I don't want to do that. We got to figure
I know,
out, we
that's
got to
what-
figure out a better way to.
that's without funding, it's always been hard, though. That's been our challenge.
But it was inherent when the legislation was written that at the local level that they need to make sure that whatever proposals won out, that those proposals needed to make sure that they were very clear that some of that funding was going to go toward being able to spend the men and women hours to go ahead and document
Right.
the results.
And what we've used that for is to document the reduction on crime and juvenile crime in general in the area is what we've used that for. Because that's easier for us to take a look at the amount of juvenile arrestees this year compared to last year and such, and the general crime reduction around those areas. Because that's what we're used to doing for crime statistics.
That's
But
that's part of it.
Yeah, that's part of it.
There's a bigger
but
picture,
that's
though.
usually a department
Right.
matter. But when it comes to specific funding, again, the legislation was written so that they could say we did 111, we handled 111 people, 92 finished the program,
Right.
X number dropped out of the program. We have we develop these local parameters. We make sure that we track their grades. We make sure that we track whether or not they appear in court again while they're in our program, those kinds of things. That was the intent of the legislation. Again, a lot has been lost in the translation. When you receive funding from Schiff Cardenas, you're supposed to be able to let them know in the proposal that you will be responding, and therefore you're supposed to be compensated for the time and energy it takes for you to correspond that information at the end of the year. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for helping to clarify that. Okay, I don't see any public comment cards on item number 4. We're on item number 4. Is there any public comment on item number 4? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 4 is now closed. With that, we'll approve the CAO recommendations. We now move to item number 3.
Item number 3, CCYF report in response to motion, Cardenas, Perry, Wesson, relative to funding levels awarded to the city and findings or accomplishments in connection with the October 9, 2008 meeting of the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council member.
Good afternoon.
So CCYF, Recreation and Parks, Housing Authority, CDD, and LAPD all receive funds from the JJ through the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, correct?
From what we understand, yes.
Okay. And the total that I have here is $2,051,967.
Correct.
And of that, CCYF's component is the YWAR program?
Yes, $246,707 proposed in this fiscal year's budget.
Okay. Can you describe for us what the YWAR program is?
Certainly.
Did you commence the YWAR program? Did you inherit the YWAR program?
Certainly. So the YWAR program is actually a program that was transferred to the Commission for Children, Youth, and Their Families this fiscal year from the Commission on the Status of Women, who actually worked in 1998 to conceptualize a program with the LA County Office of Education. Both Councilmember Hahn and Cardenas, both of you know, who have been very supportive of the program, that has been quite successful over the course of nearly 10 years. We've served combined over 2,300 young women in the program. The idea behind the funding is that it's a curriculum-based program where young women meet once a week with a professional facilitator at a series of schools. We have found over the course of the life of the investment in the program that actually the funding specifically that comes from the Shift Cardenas money is prevention money. It is specifically for young women who have not been themselves within the juvenile justice system. They are sisters, they are girlfriends, they are within families who have long histories of relationship with the juvenile justice system, and it's meant to prevent them from entering them. There's a separate pot of funding that is specifically designated to young women who are already offenders themselves, and our funding and the program that we operate once a week in a series of high schools throughout Los Angeles is based on the notion that the young women given the opportunity to prevent the kinds of unhealthy behaviors, whether physically or socially or academically, that we reduce the chances of them actually entering the juvenile justice system, or in the case where they may have been offenders, recommitting. Over the course of the program that has been housed previously in the Commission on the Status of Women, and again, once again, transferred to our commission this year, we have reconceptualized it moderately. We are building our work on the curriculum that has been used. It has been tested by an independent facilitator. It has been part of a roll-up evaluation with a contract with the RAND Corporation. Unfortunately, based on the questions that Councilmember Cardenas was asking earlier, the funding that was used by the County Probation Department to evaluate programs such as ours and others was not reinstated last year, so they're actually trying to get RAND and others to do an evaluation. That's an unfortunate decision, but that was a decision made at the county level. So we are working internally to make sure we capture the kinds of data that both of you asked earlier. Already this year, our goals specifically are to, we have 5 specific goals as the program has been transferred to our department. First, related to student enrollment and retention. Second, related to program evaluation that I just mentioned. Third, related to infrastructure and development. And fourth, curriculum development. And I'll walk those through specifically regarding the data questions that Councilmember Hahn was asking. So previously, it was very difficult to actually collect and retain the data, both not only at the local level with our young women, but in the relationship with the county. Jamiko and I, who's our Director of Community Partnerships, have worked since April to try to build a stronger relationship with the County Probation Department to get the information we need when we need it, because it's very difficult to get. 1, we will enroll 200 students at 8 school sites this fiscal year. Second, we will graduate 40% of the total number of students enrolled, which is a 12% increase from last year. And you may ask about the enrollment retention issue. Most of the young women who attend our weekly courses don't often attend for the 8-month life of the program. So by saying and setting a goal that is a reach goal and stretch goal for us of saying that 40% of the young women will graduate, it's actually a pretty significant increase from last fiscal year. Third, we want to evaluate the success of both the individual program modules and overall effectiveness of the curriculum. We actually do pre and post tests of each one of our modular units, which we reported to you in terms of the curriculum, to make sure that the young women are receiving the kinds of support, advice, and tools they need to succeed and prevent them from entering the juvenile justice system. Fourth, CCYF has this fiscal year developed systems for the collection and tracking of data. We have already twice requested from the county, though we have not yet received, information as to whether or not the young women, as a result of our program, both this fiscal year and in years prior, have entered the juvenile justice system. We know they keep that data, but they have not been able to give it to us in the way we'd like it. We have built an internal collection system with the hard work of our staff, but want to match that against the probation department. We've made that request of their research department, and we have yet to receive that information. The fifth and final goal was integrating new activities and youth projects into the curriculum, which we do with the relationships both that the staff facilitators build, as well as the on-site school staff, which are primarily based out of, what's the name of the high schools? not traditional high schools.
Continuation.
Continuation
Yeah,
high
right.
schools. We have found over the life of the grant and the program that our program module and the curriculum works best with young women not in traditional senior high schools,
Right.
but in fact when they are a captive audience as part of the
Right.
continuation work of high
Right.
schools.
Right.
So that, in a nutshell, is the 5 major goals set by the Commission for Children, Youth, and Their Families this fiscal year. We also have a new component which is different than in prior years, which is that for the first time, we have asked for alumnus of the program to be our student workers, to help both reinvest in their educations, give them a paid internship, and help them shape the future of the program. And so our staff facilitators will be working with, I believe it's 3 young women. Oh, six is the final number. 6 young women this fiscal year for the first time. And we look forward to your continued support of the program.
Okay, when you inherited this program, it was being implemented at 12 schools. How many schools is it being implemented at now?
8.
8.
And there was some very specific research that went into making that decision that I could walk you through. Number one, there was a 10% reduction in the grant. You'd asked the police department some questions about that. Quite frankly, we have no control over that funding. The funding decisions were communicated with us. Between spring of this year and just fall, between myself, Jamiko, and Kelly Hawkins, the director of CSW, we've attended 4 meetings between the 3 of us to make sure the smooth continuation of the program. And those meetings are not collaborative meetings. They're meant to inform us. And so we were informed of the budget reduction, and we had to adjust our budget accordingly. And so what we did in this fiscal year was made sure that we put the majority of our dollars on the ground, both in the staff facilitators and investing in the young women. And we, in CCYF, absorbed the administrative costs that were formerly charged to the grant.
But you said there was a 10% reduction, but when you go from 12 schools to 8, just on the number of schools, that's a 33% reduction. 12 divided by 3, that's 3 increments of 4. So you go from
No, right.
12 to 8. Are you serving more young ladies at each school, or?
Yes, that is our intention. And actually, 2 things. One, I'll hand over to Jamiko to answer some more questions about that. There was a conscious decision made related to a point I made earlier regarding the traditional senior high schools versus continuation high schools. Our staff in the field told us that based on their years of experience, many of which were with the program since its inception, that they had a very difficult time scheduling the kinds of curriculum-based work they needed to do over periods of time. Finding class locations at traditional senior high schools, getting the buy-in and support of teachers, principals, and other support was so difficult that it made it difficult for the young women who participated in the program to continue over the life of the grant. What we found was that many of those young women dropped out of the program as a result of those challenges. So based on that work, based on the evaluation, and based on the suggestions of the independent evaluator, we looked at the cost reduction from the Shiv Cardenas money and also said, where can we be smarter and work more strategically in particular schools? And we chose to only go in this fiscal year with continuation high schools and not senior high schools.
So those
That's
8,
where the reduction
those 8
went.
schools are all continuation.
Exactly.
With the exception of Van Nuys High School, which is the only regular high school that we're still in.
Now, but how many women are you serving?
This year we will be serving, Jamiko Bell, CCYF, will be serving approximately 200 young women over the course of this year with the goal of graduating, which means completion of the 8-month curriculum of 80 young women. We have 2 facilitators who are staffing the program right now. Each facilitator carries 4 schools, and so they do 1.5-hour classroom 4 days a week at one at each of the schools. It's not possible necessarily for a facilitator to carry more than that. You asked about the reduction. The position for the additional schools is there, but we're unable to fill it at this time. So what we intended to do, we did 2 things. We tried to be more strategic in our alignment of which schools we had. We evaluated all of the schools and determined that, as Raphael said, the traditional schools were not working as well. So we eliminated those, but what we are doing is targeting 2 additional continuation schools that we think we could house the program in as soon as we're able to bring on another facilitator. So we do intend to bring the program services back up to the level of 12. It's just going to have to happen incrementally as we work to fill positions and also choose new schools, which would be
When the
better to
Commission
see
on
the
Status
program.
of Women had the program, how many young ladies did they serve?
They enrolled 400 young women across the 12 schools with 3 facilitators, and they graduated about 125. So they graduated about 23% of the young girls who actually came into the program. And by enrollment means only enrollment. It doesn't mean retention. It doesn't mean that they attended even an entire module. It doesn't mean that they attended more than 4 sessions. We're really focusing on getting the young women in and keeping them engaged in the program for a much longer period of time this year.
And that was intentional. It's about quality and not quantity, because when you're counting widgets and you say how many young people enrolled in any program in the city of LA, people will throw out thousands and thousands and thousands. The issue is how many of them completed the program, how many of them went through an evaluation process, how many of them have improved their lives in some specific and measurable way. That's where we connect our particular direct results in this fiscal year too.
But you're only looking at about a 50% retention rate. 'Cause
We're-
you're starting off with 200.
Right.
And you're going to end up, you anticipate, I mean, obviously, you'd love to have 200 complete, I'm sure, but being realistic, you're estimating that your retention rate is what?
About 40% is our goal for this year.
And we base that on the history of the program.
Right.
So if we enrolled 400 young women in the past and only 125 graduated, there's a huge gap between the number of women who started at the beginning of the academic year and the number who finished at the end of the year. And we're trying to actually focus on increasing the number who start in the fall in continuation school and complete and go through graduation ceremony, which both of you have attended, in the spring.
You know, you made a comment about these the meetings that you've gone to and how they really haven't been meetings of collaboration as much as just informing you. The original allocation of this $2 million, who made that decision?
The county does.
The county decides you get that much, Recreation Parks gets this much,
Well,
Housing Authority gets this much.
I attended a meeting, and I believe Ms. Hawkins was there with me at the end of last fiscal year, where they basically indicated that they would be reducing all of the municipal agencies by 10%. And that was, of course, up in the air as we went through the ongoing state protracted budget discussions. And the meeting that I attended, upon which this report is based, it was announced that that was the final
And
decision.
everyone got a 10% across the board.
Every municipal agency got a 10% reduction across the
Did you
board.
verify that, or you just took them at their word?
Well,
I can guarantee you probation did not get cut.
they-
That's my guess. I'm willing to go out on a limb and say probation did not get cut 10%.
Well, I think there's actually...
Did LAPD get cut? Was that 428 a cut?
No, for next
See?
according to the chart that they passed out at the meeting, they showed what folks had been allocated for last year and what was being allocated this year, and I believe that everyone did get some sort of a reduction. Maybe LAPD had less of a reduction. I'd be happy to provide that supplemental documentation to the
They don't
committee
think they
for
got
your
any, so
review.
don't tell them.
Well, I think there's actually 3 different issues here that you're both bringing up. One is the issue of what is the application process to receive
Right.
the funding.
Well, and who makes that? I want to know who makes that
So
determination.
What we were reporting back to you at your request was what we understood of who receives the money in the city of LA based
Right.
on what
Right.
information we were given.
Right.
Number one. So there's an issue related to the RFP process and how the money is allocated, which is the grant.
Right.
Secondly, there's who gets to make those decisions.
Right.
At what policy level
Right.
was there a decision made
Right.
to cut or not?
Right.
Jurisdictions. In
Or
terms
even
of how much
before,
they
even
receive.
I'm talking about even before cutting. You know, why would Housing Authority get, you know, for
Right, well,
housing-based supervision? I'm not sure I know what that is, but maybe we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we-
but, versus your program.
And so that's why we're being honest with you. We have
Right.
no control over that. And what we
Right.
did was modify the program based on what we knew of the record of both
Right.
success
I
and
think that's
challenge.
right. I think that's
and
right.
then dedicated the majority of our funding.
I think
to-
that's right. If you were to have the 10% restored, for instance, or you were to have more funding, where do you see that money going?
Well, there are 2 things we've done, again, with this year in terms of the decisions. One, we made sure that we asked ourselves the questions, were the young women who are attending these continuation high schools in or adjacent to grids? Gang reduction youth development zone. Why is that important? Because there's both synergy and energy being invested in those communities. So we made decisions that were trying to build on the investment of the city, number one. Number two, should we have that money restored, either perhaps by the city council or by additional Shift Cardenas money, that we would add an additional staff facilitator to include more schools with the same logic, which is which schools do we have the most receptivity from the teachers, the principal, and other leadership? Two, how can we capture the kinds of young women, in this case, all at risk, who either are directly affiliated with or within families who have some relationship with the probation system? And third, how are they in some way within or adjacent to a grid, again, to build on the kinds of work we're trying to do citywide?
Well, as you know, I'm a big fan of YWAR. I mean, I really believe in reaching these young women who have a lot of adversity, challenges, obstacles in their life, and get them to, graduate the program. More importantly, it's not just graduating the program; it's acquiring the skills, the self-confidence, a different perspective on life and their own personal future. I heard the testimonies myself. I read their essays myself. I mean, I really believe in this. It is troubling, though, to think how many do not graduate. Previous same graduation rate as Locke High School had, by the way, 23%. That's troubling to me because I think, where are those women now? Where are those young girls, and what's happened to them? Because I see that as a growing trend of girls obviously getting involved in the gang life and starting their own lives of crime, which was kind of unheard of a couple decades ago. So I'm a big fan of this. When I look at the appropriation of these dollars, I'm a little perplexed at who makes those decisions and why. I think I would do it differently, just because I believe in this prevention end. I really believe in reaching these kids before they get involved in trouble. And law enforcement is important. I love law enforcement. We believe in that, but we just know there's more. There's more. We got to have both. We got to have law enforcement, and we've got to have prevention.
If I could respectfully recommend, then, one of the things that you could do as both a committee or as a council is there's a policy matter at issue here. We were threatened with actually having all these funds not available to us this fiscal year as part of the fiscal crisis at the state level.
Threatened by who? Are they in this room? Can you point
Yeah,
them out?
really. Let me at them.
It was one of the many pieces that were used as part of the negotiation over the budget, from what
No,
we
but
understand.
who are you negotiating with in this
Not us.
scenario?
We're not negotiating with anybody. It's actually, from what we understood, the legislature had this issue, and that this was part of the money related to why
Your
it was
friends
being
up in
held
Sacramento,
Exactly.
Tony.
And so what I'm saying here is that as a matter of policy, if you have concerns over how the money is being distributed
Yeah, I do.
in the city of LA,
I do.
I would suggest to you, or respectfully recommend to you, that that a letter be put together calling into question the methodology by which this is funded out in terms of prevention dollars, because what we're trying to do in YWAR in our department is make sure that we could tie these dollars to young women who are at risk and be able to prove that and show over time that these resources matter. And if you're
actually save us money in the long run by not
Exactly.
getting them involved in the criminal
and that's
justice
a matter
system.
of policy, not by individuals who are receiving the money, but at the highest levels regarding how those decisions are made. So that would be one of the things we would recommend.
Appreciate your recommendation, but I'm already working on going beyond a letter. I'm already working with some legislators to go
Great.
ahead and tighten up the legislation that I wrote to make sure that there's less misinterpretation and possibly even a lot much more direct relationship between the state and the city of Los Angeles.
We look forward to that.
So you don't have to be told that this is what you're getting or this is what you're not getting by
Yeah.
the county. That was not the intent.
Well, I think it speaks to, too, again, what we're starting to learn about our comprehensive strategy. Our comprehensive strategy on, fighting crime, ending gang violence. And, it seems, again, at the state level or the county level, they're still sort of piecemealing, our strategy based on funding, because that's really our strategy only works if the different components are funded, and we've got to do a better job of is this where the dollars are better spent based on what's going on in that neighborhood or that community? Do we need more dollars for housing-based supervision housing authority, or do we need more dollars in reaching young women who are about to embark on a life of crime? And that's stuff I think we're going to do in the city of Los Angeles. I think we're doing better under Jeff Carr, and I think we're doing better based on Connie Rice's report, and we're doing better based on the work in this committee of having a comprehensive strategy on using all of our tools, but in a more comprehensive, well thought out, funded strategy.
Which leads to my last question to you before we bring other departments up, and that is when it comes to the schools that you've narrowed down to and the schools that you may be implementing in the future, should the funding continue and you're able to improve on the program and learn from it, since this is the first fiscal year you have it. Are you working with the mayor's office and or monitoring where the GRZs are, gang reduction zones? I mean, are you coordinating in any fashion on that, or anticipate doing so in the future?
Yes. We were asked by the mayor's office to take into account where the grid zones were placed and to make sure that when we were managing this program this fiscal year, that we were smarter and more strategic about where we invested resources. We've done that at every step of the way. We actually sat down with our staff facilitators and asked them how best to improve the program based on the successes they've had in the past, how to make it even more successful. The schools that I mentioned, which I'll read off to you, are Johnson, Opportunities High School, Metropolitan High School, Boyle Heights, Cal Burke, Sojourner Truth, George Patton, Van Nuys, and Young. Of the 8 I mentioned, only Van Nuys is a traditional school. And based on, again, our staff feedback, it's because we've gotten such strong support from the teachers and the administration there. And again, should we make any additional adjustments, we'd make them with the lens of where are the young women in which specific neighborhoods and schools
who are at most at risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those are tough choices to make, but we're basing it on the data.
I would just want to add that of the 8 schools that we're in, 7 of them are affiliated or associated. They are continuation high schools of grid associated schools. And in addition, we're actually looking at Frida Kahlo and View Park, which are also continuations of schools that are included in the grid zones.
Okay, good.
There's one other thing, actually, since I know you
almost let you go, but if you want to keep
Well, and the reason
talking.
why is because where could we get your help? And so, there is an issue of freezes in the city right now, and the money related to the staff vacancy that we mentioned earlier in our presentation is actually tied up in the city freeze process. And so this money comes directly from the county, and we would love to have that position unfrozen. So anything you could do to help us advocate to unfreeze that, we would welcome.
I think that's, introduce a motion, Tony. I'll
Didn't
second.
realize that grant funds were frozen.
They're subject to the same scrutiny as any other funds.
See, that's good to know.
All right,
Make a
okay, we'll
motion.
commence that process. Okay. Thank you. Recreation and Parks?
Do you know what that is? Housing-based supervision.
Find out.
Man, it's a lot of freaking money.
Good afternoon.
After-school programs, or
Carl Cooper.
after-school enrichment programs.
Yes.
Can you tell us about them?
Carl Cooper, Recreation and Parks.
And Anita Meacham, Recreation and Parks.
We actually use the funds through the Class Parks program, and it's through the, it's called the Youth Internship, Youth Employment Internship Program. It is a recreation-based youth program where we teach 14 to 18-year-olds basically life skill class.
Right.
And we do everything from money management, professional etiquette, resume composition, job seeking. During the course, it's an 8-week course. They take an educational trip. We partner with the Cabrillo Museum for most of the time of the project. And at the end of the 8-week course, if they've completed 64 hours of service, they get a $200 stipend as part of completion. And they also get a fun trip at the end. And usually it's Disneyland, Magic Mountain, Universal. Program's been going very well, but just like both our predecessors that came up, we don't have a say in how much money we get. We are not a voting member through Recreation and Parks. It seems that they basically tie county parks and city parks to the same amount of money. I always kind of look at what county parks get for the program. But yeah, we definitely do not, when we sit at the table, we actually go to all the meetings, but we're a non-voting member like most of the other CBOs and some of the other entities there.
Okay. So the bottom line is this is something that the department identifies as to where you could utilize this best, which communities need this kind of support, and then you tie it into the Cabrillo, what did you say, the Cabrillo?
Cabrillo Museum.
Cabrillo Museum, and also a regional trip for all the kids.
Yes, and what we try to do is we've tried over the last 6 years moving around to different class park sites. This last summer with the Grid Zone starting and the Summer Night Lights program, with the mayor's office, we actually we were able to put it at one of those sites at Jim Gilliam Recreation Center. And actually this fall, the fall program, we have one in another grid zone at Hubert Humphrey Recreation Center. So we see the value of that, and we're trying to tie it to grid zones going forward. But we move it around in different areas of the city. We try to get it in the valley. We try to get it in central LA, west and south.
So you have your internal process of trying to identify where the most need is, yet at the same time you're coupling that with your acknowledgement and awareness of where the grid zones are.
Yes, we are. Along with that, though, we also try to look at moving it to different locations because we do have 47 class park sites. We want everybody to get a share. We've been really successful in, for instance, if it's in the harbor area, making sure we get vans or transportation from other
How many
harbor
sites right now do you
We try
have
to go
this?
3 sites per quarter. Right now, for instance, we're at Normandale Rec Center in the harbor. We're at Echo Park, which is down kind of central LA, and then we're in the valley.
So you do 12 sites a year?
Yes.
And you rotate them?
We rotate them.
So conceivably, if you had $2 million to work with instead of $500,000 to work with, you could rotate them around all 48 class parks?
As long as we can hire staff, yes. Yes.
No, but I'm talking about the monetary
Oh, yes,
confinement.
definitely we
If you had the potential
Yes.
of 4 times the amount of money, you could potentially
You could duplicate
have
that
4
program.
times as much activity.
You could have it at each class park site, which would be advantageous.
What a concept.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm a big fan of class parks. I've seen the results for myself. And again, this is really what we're talking about is getting kids after school a good recreation program with people who are taking an interest in their lives. And it's great. It's great. I fight for them whenever I can to be in my parks.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Housing Authority? Anybody here from Housing Authority? No.
Oh, good. I
Right.
say they lose that and we give that to YWAR.
Shift it over to, we'll split it between YWAR and Rec and Park.
Yeah.
But we have to ask the county for permission.
Oh, okay.
Because they dictate.
All right. I was just very interested to know what that is, housing-based supervision.
Anybody know what housing-based supervision is within Housing Authority? Ooh, not much collaboration going on.
Yeah.
Nah.
I would love to, yeah, it would be great.
All right. Okay, well, what we'll do is, the committee will have the Housing Authority make a presentation at a future date. I'll have the staff apprise them of the fact that we have some questions for them. And anybody here from CDD? High risk, high need?
Good afternoon, Sharon Morris with CDD. I have to tell you I'm at a loss here because I did not have a chance to see the report. But we do receive the Shift Cardenas dollars for 2 of our programs operated through our Youth Opportunity Movement sites. One is the Students for Higher Learning, where we work with young men who have served their time and are being released from Camp Gonzales and are coming back into the community. And that's out of our Watts office. And our staff works very closely with them to keep them in school, find them jobs, work with them on work readiness skills and presentation of themselves for employment. The other program is the Youth Opportunity Intensive Transitions, where again, we're working with kids that are coming back from a variety of camps or referrals through their probation officers and getting them into a variety of programs for the services that they need to make that transition back into the community.
Okay. And what methods do you use or what kind of tracking do you do when it comes to logging in? How many young people you're working with on an annual basis? How many of them complete the various programs in which they enroll, et cetera?
We use our ISIS system, our traditional electronic information and tracking system.
So you enroll them in that system?
Yes.
Regardless of what component?
That's right.
of the programs that you
That's
just
right.
described.
So in this case, we have staff members that are tracking them, and they keep updating them in the system.
And what coordination do you have with LAPD? When you-
On this program, it's really with the probation department much more than LAPD, but we always work closely with LAPD. And in particular, it's not funded through this program, it's funded through block grant. We have a terrific program called YAP, Youth, I'm blanking.
So the acronym is YAP.
The acronym is YAP, and that's through our family development networks, where kids that are first-time offenders get referred into our programs rather than being channeled into the juvenile justice system. And that also is tracked through our ISIS program, and the police department have access also to that database on the kids that they're tracking to make sure that they don't offend again, and that they and their families follow through with the program.
And those students are court appointed?
Pardon me?
They're court appointed?
They are not. This is to keep them out of the juvenile justice system. So we work directly with the police department on these programs.
All right.
So just again, about when they come back, they're getting back involved in the community. Again, you said we always work with LAPD, but is there a specific effort on to let the LAPD know that we're working with these kids? They're in our program. They're not just
hanging.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those programs, I don't believe so. It's not a specific component.
I think that's part of our problem. And I know in the Watts community, particularly, we have done enormous work with the community, with the Watts Gang Task Force, with our intervention workers, with our prevention workers. We have a very close relationship with LAPD, Southeast, commanding officer, whoever they may be at that particular time, senior lead officers. Because part of the problem has been kind of just a lack of communication and a lack of knowledge, I think, sometimes on both ends. On some of the officers, maybe not knowing that this is someone we're working with. We want to work with you on, not just kind of a kid out there on their own. So I think it helps in the end if we can do a better job of communicating. I have found LAPD to be a real partner in that community in a way that I really haven't seen in a long time, of just working with, just kind of knowing who's who, knowing who's coming back, having an understanding that we're kind of all working together to, because it's tough. It's got to be tough to come out of a camp and find yourself back in the old neighborhood. And there's a lot of issues, but I would urge you to, as a part of a component of that, to figure out maybe how to have communication.
Great. Good idea.
Particularly with the senior lead officer.
All right. Okay, thank you. With that, we'll just instruct the various departments to continue monitoring and learning about the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council meetings, and hopefully in the coming months we'll go ahead and start asserting ourselves as a city in that process a lot more. And like I said, I've already started the ball rolling in the state legislature when they convene in January. I'm working with the senator and assembly member to make sure that we can sharpen up that language. And if they don't want to listen to us, whether the county likes it or not, state legislature trumps counties. So, all right. With that, we'll note and file that report. Next, we move to item number 2.
Item number 2 is continued from October 20th, 2008. CCYF reports in response to motion, Cardenas, Rosendahl, Hahn, relative to the Safe Passages Program and related matters.
Again.
Okay. Safe Passages is the item. We have CCYF came up first. Okay. What can you tell us about Safe Passages and your involvement or what it means to your particular organization.
So, Councilmember Rafael Lopez, Executive Director of the Commission for Children and Their Families, Jamaica Bell, Director of Community Partnerships. As we shared with you at the ad hoc meeting held at Mar Vista Gardens a few weeks back, we run one component of what is commonly referred to in the City of LA as safe passages, but in fact, we don't run any safe passage programs ourselves. We run the Kid Watch LA program, which is a comprehensive program to address child safety, neighborhood safety, and traffic safety. And we have submitted to you our report that sort of frames that work. We are in 130 elementary schools across the city of Los Angeles. And we have done a tremendous amount of work to make sure that the programs that are chosen by the schools and the parents are those that best fits the needs of those communities. And so in the context of safe passages, we tried to articulate a couple of weeks ago that we don't run those programs that are currently named safe passages in the city. In fact, previously, as we shared with you at that ad hoc committee meeting, the Community Development Department ran those programs under LA Bridges 1 and 2, and the jurisdiction for anything related to safe passages has been passed on to the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development.
Okay. CDD here? When it comes to safe passages, are you the person who knows about that, or?
Well, Safe Passages was part of the Bridges program. It was
Yes.
part of Bridges 1, which is no longer with our department. The only program that we are currently working with that has a Safe Passages component is the one in CD 10 with Community Build Project Save. And they have a small Safe Passages component. But other than that, it's all been transferred to the mayor's office.
Oh, okay. So it was part of LA Bridges prior
Right. That's
to
right.
July 1st of this year.
It was with us through June 30th, and it's been with the mayor's office since July 1st.
Okay. And as far as you can tell, that was part of the policy decisions of the council, et cetera, when it came to the reorganization of intervention, prevention programs, et cetera?
That's correct.
Okay. As far as CDD is concerned, was there any overlap between the Kid Watch programs and the Safe Passages programs, or?
Not by design. I
So
believe
there was
one in.
There was an awareness of them, but they
Yes.
were not matched together. They were done as
That's correct.
separate, identified which schools need them, et cetera.
That's correct.
Okay. And how many Safe Passages programs were under the responsibility of LA Bridges program?
They were at each of the 27 middle schools, and then there were, I believe, 4 high schools that were picked up by council motion over time. There was Jordan, Hamilton, I believe there was one at Locke.
Venice.
Okay. And was
I don't know if there was one at Locke, but.
At Locke or Fremont, I think, one of the two of them. But there were 4 high schools that were picked up.
I think Venice was the last one that was added.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions for CDD?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
My questions are all for the mayor's office.
Okay. LAPD? I think you may have answered this question earlier about regarding how many safe passage programs was LAPD engaged with, or a supportive component of. Was that 48 sites?
Right, 48 sites as it related to our enforcement
Right.
effort. And to be honest with you, I think the councilwoman was right in that safe passages has about 3 different meanings to me as it relates to our role with this particular grant, as it relates to community-based organizations that are contracted to do safe passages work. And then there's a whole different focus with LA Unified School District, the Department of Justice, from the State Department of Justice, and their safe passages collaboratives that we've all been involved in. So
again, you didn't run safe passages programs. You were complementary to.
Absolutely, and in each of the, and yes, we complement it. In each area, would, depending on who the contract vendor was or whoever got the contract to provide safe passages, as far as the jacketed individuals at the schools, we would support that particular area. For example, in South LA, the majority of them went to Community Build, and so we had a good working relationship with Community Build to support that particular program.
So LAPD's component of any involvement in the safe passages was more of a response to bringing a component of what you can bring to a safe passage area.
Right. It would be a partnership in that regard.
So it's usually another entity, another city department or what have you, would identify where a safe passages was needed, and then they would bring you in to ask if you have the resources or the ability to complement that with your office.
Generally, it wasn't through another city department. It was generally through the contract, having a relationship with the contract company or whoever had. Like my direct knowledge is through Community Build, and through our relationship with Community Build is what built our relationship in being able to support their safe passage contract.
You said you had how many safe passages?
48 schools
40.
that we're on our grant that we...
Because we don't have 48 safe passage formal programs.
No, and the money that we have used for our first discussion on this is only a part of the efforts that we play at
Again, basically,
getting kids to and from school.
Right.
Safely.
Basically, it's identified. There's a certain school and there's a certain route that these kids are walking, and it's unsafe for a number of reasons. You're coming in as law enforcement to try to kind of clean up some of those crime-ridden areas.
Well, that's our role.
Here's my question: have any of your safe passages become safe?
Safer. Yes.
Not safe yet?
Yes. No, I would
really,
say that there are parts of the city.
If you were making your passages safe, we wouldn't need safe passages.
That's true. But on the other hand, in all honesty, the size of us and what we're responsible to do, we can't do that.
Right.
And so really, it shouldn't be just on the city. It is, or should it be just on the schools? But a collaboration of the schools, the city, the parents, and everybody else involved will make this all work well.
Right.
And so bringing us all together is obviously the key to being as effective as we possibly can.
So let me just ask one more thing. So everywhere right now that we do have a formal contracted safe passage, I'm thinking of it in the terms of the jacketed, you're there. But not everywhere that you have a safe passage are there the jacketed.
That's correct.
But you are complementing every one of our safe passages?
I don't want to say that everywhere in the city we're doing that.
Okay.
The ones that I'm aware of, primarily in South Los Angeles, because that's where I spent the majority of my time, we were a partner in that, yes.
Like Big Mike's Safe Passage, you guys were supporting that.
Yes.
Speaking of LAUSD, do we have a representative of LAUSD here? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you help the city understand when it comes to the perspective of LAUSD, when you hear safe passages, what does it mean to the school district? How do you interpret when somebody says, oh, there's a safe passages program, or we need one, or should we get one, or there is one in existence? What?
I think actually, as Councilwoman Hahn put it, there are several definitions. The definition that we are most involved with are those ones that are created by a Safe School Collaborative Subcommittee. That Safe School Collaborative Subcommittee, assisted by the Attorney General's office, included about 12 to 13 schools. In doing so, we provided, what was provided was the various agencies came in to discuss ways and means of making sure that kids got to and from school safely. And in doing so, not only gave them safe passage, but kept some of our safety issues off campus by having kids not bring those issues back to the campus. The Attorney General's office has stepped back from working with Safe Passages because of budget issues. And we are now taking over those particular Safe Passage subcommittees ourselves. And we're using what are called coordinators from our various local districts who are helping with that, as well as other agencies, including the city attorney's office.
No specific questions. I'm just going to say I've got to go. I've got another commitment. I think hopefully what I want to say before I leave is I'm very concerned, obviously, that I think the funding is ultimately ending for some of what we think is Safe Passage. I've been a part of some of these school safety collaboratives, particularly the one with Locke. I mean,
Yes.
it was a great bringing together of all the resources. We got a problem. How do we get these kids to and from safely? That one, when they're working, they work well. I'm concerned, like, I know there are some, like, I think even Jordan, I think Markham, that came from the community. It was the community that said, wait a minute, these kids are being harassed on the way to school. Some of them are staying home. They're afraid. They're not showing up. So it was kind of the community that said, we need to do a Safe Passage. I know myself, I've scraped up the dollars for a couple of Safe Passages in my council district so that the kids could come to and from your schools safely. So I'm hoping, Tony, that we figure out a way. I mean, I'm worried because I still think kids are not safe in certain areas. What's it going to take, particularly with the funding going away? What if you're not in a grid zone? What if it hasn't come to the collaborative level, but yet the community knows these kids are not safe. They need help going to and from schools. Where are we going to find the money? And I think the school district should be as concerned as I am, and we've got to figure out a way to fund some of these Safe Passage, the ones where the jacketed volunteers, go out there and literally stand as a human chain, keeping these kids safe on their way to and from school. How are we going to fund these ongoingly? I can't. I am not going to be happy if the funding goes away. We don't know where the funding is. It hasn't come to a level where it becomes a collaborative, but we know there's kids that are still afraid to walk to school. How are we all going to work together to ensure that, these Safe Passage programs are indeed funded?
And of the 13 Safe Passage subcommittees that we have, we are looking to expand that.
Yeah.
For each high school. Right now, we have tremendous support from LAPD, who offers their stations as an example for us to meet so that we can bring all the
Right.
various entities together
Right.
to discuss these issues.
Yeah, but I don't think you can ever substitute the human chain element of Safe Passage. I think LAPD will tell you their resources are very thin. They are put where the crime is happening, and it would be a luxury to think that we would always have officers, every day, twice a day, exactly in the spot where we think there could be problems. That's probably not going to happen, and they'll probably tell us that, particularly when it's in and out of the housing developments. So I think we need to, guarantee. We got to figure out, and I can't stay, but I hope you figure out how we have guaranteed funding for these Safe Passage programs that are in existence right now, because the last time I heard, those passages were not safe. And until I'm told that those passages are safe by LAPD, then we need Safe Passages. And I'm nervous if they're not in a grid zone, if they've been under bridges, if they haven't gotten to this collaborative table, how are we going to fund them? I mean, I'll, go fundraise if I need to, but that just seems like a not very smart, strategic way to keep our kids safe. So that's my concern moving forward. And maybe you and Jeff can figure this out.
No, snap our fingers and come up with the money.
Yeah. But did you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
You
But
get my
it
concern,
really
and the schools should be concerned too.
It comes down
we
to
are.
Okay.
the resources.
And our superintendent, by the way, has indicated the necessity to have a safe school collaborative at each high school, along with a safe passage
Right.
subcommittee.
And I will say, I will be on the record, I sometimes think the school district hasn't stepped up as much as I'd like to see you step up in terms of resources. First of all, you guys get paid when they show up at school. I mean, you make money on these kids showing up at school, and when they're not showing up at school, but I don't want to be crass about it. I mean, we want them there in school because they're learning and they're safe, but it seems to me you lose money when they're not there.
We do.
You do, and that affects everything else you're trying to do in the school. So I would like to see your budget reflect a safe passage line item as part of what you do to educate our kids.
Now,
There.
when it comes to
I see
LAUSD
it.
and budgeting and whatever your complementary role is of a Safe Passages program, how does that work? Do you have after-school programs? You supplement it, fortunately, when you have Beyond the Bow there already on campus. How do you engage in a Safe Passages when there is a Safe Passages?
Okay. Well, I don't know how familiar everyone is with Beyond the Bell branch. We're a branch in the school district that was created specifically to deal with after-school program services. So at the campuses that we're talking about, and actually throughout LA Unified, there are after-school program services in addition to the Bridges programs on these campuses that we're referring to. And our campuses are open from 3 or school dismissal time until 6 p.m. every school day. So those are grant-funded programs, state and federal grant programs, and the Beyond the Bell branch contracts with the community-based organizations to provide these services. So I don't want to say on every school campus we have them, but the majority of our school campuses right now, definitely at the middle school level, we have those state and federally grant-funded programs on campus, as well as a district-funded program open until 6 p.m. daily as well, called our Youth Services After-School Program. So there's, to follow up on Councilmember Hahn's comment, there are additional resources being brought into the schools to help keep our kids safe and connected to the schools after school until 6 p.m.
But you're telling us that those are basically grant-funded activities or general fund?
It's a combination of both. We have the grant-funded programs where we contract specifically with community-based organizations that go through a vetting process prior to us contracting with them. Those would be the community-based organizations such as Woodcraft Rangers, LA Conservation Corps. But then we've got the Youth Services general funded, district-funded program after school as well until 6 p.m. every school day. That's more of a permissive program. Where there's some unstructured but supervised sports activities. We also have a new partnership with the LA 84 Foundation to provide sports programs on campus as well. So there's additional resources coming into the district to keep these kids connected until 6 p.m. on those campuses if they're so inclined.
Okay, but that sounds more like school-based activities,
That's correct.
Not necessarily what Janice Hahn was describing about beyond the school
That's
grounds
correct.
as far as getting to and from school safely.
That's correct.
Okay. Hold on a second. I want to ask the city attorney a question while you're still here. Anybody here from the city attorney's office? Good afternoon. Kid Watch. Kid Watch started in the city attorney's office?
A while back, yes.
Okay. Do you still administer any kinds of programs like that or similar to that, or?
No, not at this time. The city attorney recently took a number of school-related initiatives and brought them all together under our new Safe Schools division. And those include the Operation Bright Future Truancy Prevention Program, our School Safety Prosecutor Program, both of which are more traditional law enforcement related programs. One, a process to bring parents to the table and discuss their child's truancy and engage them in a way that will result in increased attendance for the child. As far as the school safety prosecutor program that was more around the safe school zones and focused on traditional law enforcement responses, vertical prosecution, and working with LAPD and LAUSD police on reducing crime in those areas. In addition to those two programs, we took the Markham initiative where we embedded a prosecutor into Markham Middle School for over a year, and that prosecutor implemented more non-traditional responses, more prevention, education, and student engagement to improve attendance and also reduce the number of truancies at the school. And our goal has been to combine all of these different programs, and we are in 58 schools, but the focus of the division right now is in 27 schools, which are comprised of 9 middle schools and 1 affiliated high school and elementary school for each of those 9 schools.
You said 58, but 27. What's the difference?
58 schools total. Of those, 11 are elementary schools where we're doing truancy prevention as well as in-class curriculum education with non-attorney staff. We have 20 middle schools where we're doing truancy prevention only, and that's working with school PSA counselors and with school police, LAPD, and DCFS and other partners on truancy sweeps, and also a hearing process, as I said before, to engage the parents and the student to improve attendance. And then the 27 schools are these focus clusters where we're treating those more as focused crime reduction and physical improvement and student engagement, student, teacher, and parent engagement. You're probably more familiar with the models we've used with Safer City initiatives and our block projects, which we used to work in with other programs we've had before. So we're using that same philosophy of flooding an area with resources to improve not just the student attendance, but also to reduce crime in the area.
Okay, so that's pretty much what the city attorney's office involvement is in our schools within our city geographic area is today.
That's correct.
And prior to that, you were doing these kinds of activities on top of the Kid Watch program?
Right. A number of years ago, we used to work with our law enforcement partners, LAPD, probation, parole, and others in crime reduction focused enforcement areas, much like the CLEAR program. Our NEST program was a program that the focus of which was reduction of street sales of narcotics. But there was an outreach component, and we had community resource specialists that worked with us in the local schools to set up safe corridors to and from schools.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So the school district is having various components of contact with different city agencies. City Attorney's Office, there's some collaboration going on there with LAPD, with children and youth and their families when it comes to probation, all kinds of, probation's county. Mm-hmm. So, and previously, I guess, directly and or indirectly with Community Development Department when Bridges programs were running Safe Passages. So are you aware of the changes that are going on with the city of Los Angeles right now that Safe Passages used to be with CDD, it's not with CDD anymore? Are you aware that some changes are coming down the pike?
To some degree, yes.
Okay. So what kind of dialogue are you having with the city right now? Are you accepting the fact that, gosh darn it, it was nice when it was happening, and now I guess we're not going to have that complement around our schools and our children? Or are you going to the board and expressing to them that the city's making some changes and got to figure out how to fill those gaps? Or
that would be Al Cortez.
We'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
We weren't prepared to actually speak to this issue today or address this issue,
Okay.
but we will get back to you.
All right, well, you're not a city department, so I hope to hear from you in the future on that. You answer to the board, not to the city council or the mayor. But I appreciate your being candid with this committee, and that's one of the things that we've realized in these deliberations over the last few years about how we can communicate better. And I'm talking about the city communicating with the county and the school district and everybody else, and within our own city, our own departments, and the county has various departments, et cetera. And what we've been talking about trying to do is be much more efficient as a community as a whole, regardless of who's doing what, but be much more efficient and be much more collaborative so that we don't have duplication, so that we can reduce the duplication and have a lot more effectiveness with a broader number of constituents. So appreciate you coming forward and sharing your points with us.
Thank you.
Councilmember, if I can just
Yeah.
add on to your last comments, I will say that in our discussions with LAUSD over which schools we should be servicing, there was a lot of talk about and lengthy discussion to make sure that we did not overlap, that the city did not overlap its programs. And so the schools that we selected for the Safe Schools Division are schools that were traditionally underserviced, and we went out of our way to make sure they didn't overlap with either schools that the mayor was already in or the DA's office already had a truancy prevention program, so that LAUSD would get the maximum coverage that they could.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representatives from the mayor's office?
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Good. Jeff Carr from the mayor's office.
Been busy lately?
Yes.
Anything new?
There's always something new.
Okay. Anything happened today that?
We did release, as you know, 3 RFPs today. One for gang intervention services in all of the 12 grid zones. We also released an RFP for prevention and intervention for areas outside of the gang reduction youth development zones in other parts of the city, and then also a request for proposal for an outside evaluator for the entire gang reduction youth development effort.
Good. You've been busy?
Yes.
Good, good. All right. As you heard the dialogue earlier, CDD used to be the main department within the city that was involved with safe passages through their Bridges program. The LA Bridges program basically is winding down. It's no longer going to exist, I guess, either as components of what they did and also as title, as Bridges 1 and Bridges 2. But a lot, and I'm choosing my words carefully, a lot of that activity is translating over to the mayor's office and your purview and your activity.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to the safe passages, can you explain to us what your understanding of what safe passages was from your perspective and what safe passages is going to be when the LA Bridges is finally phased out? And at this point in time, it's anywhere between December 31st and or the end of the first quarter of 2009, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, I think actually by this conversation that's been had at the committee today that actually leaked over into the conversation, the item number 3 about JJCPA, is saying the word safe passages is kind of like saying you're a progressive. If you talk to 40 different people, you might get 40 different answers as to what they mean by being progressive. And I think you just heard an example of that in the last hour, that what we mean by safe passages depends on who you're talking to and where they sit. And so I think one of the fundamental challenges we have in the city, and I mean city not just within city government, but the city and all the various entities, including the county, the school district and the like, is that we need to come up with a common definition of what we mean by safe passages. Then I frankly think that what we need to do is come up with a a model, if that's related to schools, which I think we all agree, that it has something to do with our schools, of what that looks like. Because, as is pointed out today, LAPD has a certain model of safe passages in their mind. I think the Attorney General's office had the safe passage collaboratives, or the safety collaboratives. What the city has funded largely through savings in these direct contracted with some of the agencies through LA Bridges is even within the four that were funded through savings are very different in amongst themselves. There was a mandate years ago when I was a nonprofit leader that every Safe Passages was going to run a program, and for a while it was very specific and prescriptive. Over time, it changed into sort of it's optional, and then how you do it is optional. And so you go out to any place, and what you see in Safe Passages could be very, very different. And so I think it's why we actually have been in conversation with the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families about this whole idea of Safe Passage, because the one place where I think we do have a formalized program is within Kid Watch and all the three different facets of children's safety that is done through Kid Watch. And so what we've been in discussions with them about is, first of all, let's figure out what we mean by safe passage and come up with some common language and definition. And then secondly, my opinion is I think we need to, as I said, tailor that to schools that are different. So there obviously might be some uniqueness in each community, but I think what Safe Passages looks like at the elementary school is likely very different than what Safe Passage, or it might be a little different as to what Safe Passages looks like at a middle school. And then again, it may even look even more different at a high school. And so I think what we've been looking at is what might the model look like around an elementary school. And I think the Kid Watch program that the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families runs is probably a good model for what we're doing on elementary school. I think what we would come up with middle school and high school might be different. Once we figure out what makes sense, we have some buy-in from folks, then I think it's good to have a conversation to say, well, what does that cost us? If this is the design at an elementary, middle, and high school, and these are the different strategies that we employ to create a safe passage zone around those schools, then what's the cost for doing that? And then I think once we determine what those costs are, then I think it's then appropriate to have a conversation to say, okay, is there a pool of money? Is there a pot of money that exists right now that we would like to reprogram towards that effort? Or there are funds that we'd like to go after, maybe that another jurisdiction controls, like Shift Cardenas, and try and get our fair share and use that for that. I think there's any number of efforts we could do, create a partnership with the school district, ask them to pay for part of that, we pay for part of that. So I think there's a whole number of ways we could approach that, and that's the conversation we've been having.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to point out is, first of all, it's my understanding that through the budget process and this transition from CDD to the mayor's office on many programs, especially Bridges 1 and Bridges 2, there wasn't identified funds in this budget year that we're in for safe passages.
That's
correct?
Actually, there was for the first 6 months.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, to continue it.
No, there was not. We didn't identify
So
any
as
funds
Bridges
to
1 and
continue.
Bridges 2 goes,
That's correct.
so does the safe passages the way we knew it in the past, out of CDD.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, there's a lot of different versions of safe passages on the lighter side and all the other components, the complementary matters of safe passages. But the more formal safe passages I'm referring to are the ones that were as a result of CDD's sources.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would use the adjective or the formal, but I would suggest that the programs in CDD that were classified as safe passages that were enhanced contracts for Bridges 1 or 2 with additional funds. You are correct that those were continued for 6 months. They may be continued if they were attached to Bridges 2 contracts, possibly through the first quarter of next year, but then they will end. That's indeed correct.
Now, that being the case, how do you envision the dialogue and or the determination as to how or if safe passages, at least the formal components of safe passages that seem to be going away as Bridges 1 and Bridges 2 will end. Is that something where the mayor's office pulls together LAUSD and whatever city experienced minds or what have you to try to design or come up with the what safe passages needs are or were, or is that something that you think is more out of working again through CDD and then using their past experiences, and then from that vantage point forwarding that over to the mayor's office and asking the mayor's office if there's any light at the end of the tunnel as how we could continue that now that we're in this different paradigm where the mayor's office is in charge of these kinds of programs, where in the past you weren't.
Well, I think what our that's why we've proactively engaged the Commission on Children, Youth, and Family in that conversation, because we wanted to build on what's already being done there, which we think actually the Kid Watch program is a good model, particularly at the elementary school level, to build on that and use some of the expertise that they have there through running that program to say how could we design and build a program related to middle schools and high school. And so that's why we've engaged in that conversation to do that. We did make a determination that we didn't think we should continue to fund the sort of patchwork system that we have right now that was largely funded through savings every year through annual savings, that we aren't building the budget based on savings.
Thank you for reminding us of that. That's the main problem that any organization has, public or private, when you're trying to move something forward with adjunct funds, instead of moving something forward with identified, qualified, quantified funds, and then making it a line item through your process year to year. That's the fundamental problem that we have as a city when it comes to safe passages.
Right.
It appears to me that CDD, thankfully, was figuring out ways in order through savings to go ahead and continue these programs, by and large effective, and helping keep kids safe, and also working collaboratively with communities to make sure that they engage the community as well. It's all good stuff, but the problem is we were doing it with by allowing CDD or hoping and expecting them to assemble funds every year, and somehow they figured out how to do it. But with that, it was never assumed by me that the mayor's office would have some way of doing that, for example, come January 1st of next year or April 1st of next year, when Bridges 1 and Bridges 2 are no longer in existence. So, but the fact of the matter is we have communities who have come to have a comfort level of knowing that those programs are existing and where they're actually needed by and large. So what do you think we need to do or should do between now and the end of Bridges 1 and Bridges 2 to try to figure out how to appropriately and responsibly continue some fashion of that, if we can, and with what?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, it's important before we allocate funds to a program, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, there's two components. It's identifying and structuring it again, either anew and or with previous experience, et cetera, creating that structure and that identifying this is what a program should be, right? This is how we can hold it accountable and responsible. And then there's the other component of the funding.
Right. And we made a decision in our office, conscious decision to say we're going to end the funding and we are going to engage in a process to try and determine what we mean by safe passages, and I said earlier what it looks like, and then determine the cost for something like that, and then address the issue of where we identified the funds to be able to run that. And that will mean that in what's currently been done through CDD funded through savings, there will be a gap between when that ends and likely when that any new effort that the city would undertake would actually start up.
So are you assuming that you're not a department, the mayor's office, your component of the mayor's office is going to engage in that and try to arrive at let's call it the next phase,
sure,
if it exists? Or are you thinking that that's something that the council should work on and then collaborate with the mayor's office, or vice versa?
we were taking.
Hold on one second. The reason why I have to ask you this question, and it's coming to me as I'm listening and realizing we're in it now. We're in the transition now, but thank God we do have some time. What has occurred to me is, before, when it came to these programs, 9 times out of 10 it would commence out of a particular council member or the council as a whole coming to a meeting of the minds with a motion, and then through the budget process, et cetera. Now we're talking about the policy of that, by and large, has shifted from the council to the mayor's office. And so I really am, total question mark. How do you envision that we move forward on this particular component? Because of all the things that have happened through this shifting, this is the one thing that we have come to identify that might go away, unless there's something developed in the meantime. Again, 2 components. One thing is identifying what it should look like, and what the criteria is for where we should apply it, where it should be applied. And the second component is, now how do we fund it? Because we don't have that CDD component anymore.
Well,
of funding.
I don't think it's the only thing that we've determined is going to go away. I mean, we did fund through LA Bridges 1. We funded 27 middle schools for basically a campus or a community base that was connected very closely to the middle school campuses. We made a determination to end that program. So some of those are going away. We've now developed a geographically focused, comprehensive gang reduction strategy that's in 12 target areas with some ancillary, smaller areas outside of that. It is likely, it's not likely, it is sure, I'm sure, that not all 27 of those middle schools or those areas will be covered. So there will be the very real challenge and truth of it is there will be things that will go away that have been funded through LA Bridges over the past number of years as we implement this new strategy. So some of that is Bridges 1 programs, but it's also Safe Passages programs, as they have been currently structured and funded through savings, will go away as well. Because of, actually, if you look at some of the needs assessments, Safe Passages is one thing that in all of these targeted areas has been identified by the community as one of the things they're concerned about is kids getting to and from school. We've both, there have been some providers through prevention who have seen that as part of what they want to do in terms of the prevention side in addressing the issue of getting those targeted 10 to 15-year-old kids to and from school safely. We also, in the RFP that was released today for for intervention, as well as for the non-grid zones related to intervention, one of the things that is mentioned there as outreach workers, street outreach workers, intervention workers are doing the work in the course of their trying to interrupt violence and to reduce confrontations. Certainly some of those gang-related confrontations do occur in and around schools. So it would be certainly something that some of those particular providers might put forth as part of their proposal in response to that RFP, a strategy in which they will, part of what they would do might be to do a certain amount of safe passages at a particular school who is in one of those targeted grid areas, or for the non-grid intervention proposal, they might propose something similar as well. So it's hard to know until we've gone through that process how much will just disappear completely and how much of it might be, in fact, picked up to some degree, maybe in a very similar form as, because they're so different as what's being done in certain places or being in a different form in other places. But in the meantime, we are engaged in this conversation of really looking at that. We'd certainly be welcome to have work with the council on talking and looking at what something like that, safe passages, would mean, coming up with a common definition, and then, developing a model, maybe 3 different models as I suggested, and then looking at, okay, what are the costs related to that, and then have a conversation in the city about how we might fund that.
And potentially culminating in some final descriptions and or hopefully identifying of potential funds by the end of the first quarter or sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Yeah, that could happen then, or further into the future as well.
But ideally, to me, from my perspective, so that if there is a stringent need in a particular area and there's a gap, if we were to be able to do that a little sooner, maybe we could start with the first one being here and then identifying more funds and the second one. But I think the most important thing about this dialogue is that we all have to recognize is that CDD did what they could with savings, and then the Safe Passages programs, by and large, seem to be well received. Unfortunately, very different in various communities, and I don't even want to get into whether or not anybody acknowledges how diverse they were and how they arrived at where they were at. I don't think that dialogue needs to happen because that was then, this is now. But the fact of the matter is, I'm afraid that if we don't try to focus, as a city, council, mayor's office, et cetera, mainly us now, because there's no department that is in charge of Safe Passages. I agree with you that the closest thing we have right now that is funded is Kid Watch. Is that the building block for the Safe Passages in the future? Remains to be seen. But we have to develop the policy, identification of what Safe Passages is going to be, obviously what kind of variations there are, because everybody admits one size doesn't fit all. And then secondly, where are we going to get the money? It's not budgeted this year.
That's right. Well, we would certainly, I think our office would be very comfortable in taking the lead on that. I think we would want to work, as we've begun the conversations, build on the conversations we had with the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families, and we'd be happy to come back, in some 60 days or something like that, 90 days, and at least present some sort of, recommendation as to what we have thought through, what we think would be a good model, and then have a conversation in the city about, is that the right way? Should we adjust that? Should we tweak that? We'd be happy to take the lead on that.
Okay, good, because outside this committee, had you not said that, you and I probably somehow in the next 30 days or so flip a coin or something and see who's going to take the lead on it. So glad to hear that you're going to.
Sure.
Because otherwise, somebody like myself or at Janice would probably be implementing a motion and try to start the ball rolling again of what are we going to do now? Are we even going to call it Safe Passages? Who knows? But
Right.
something to fill that potential void in some of the communities. And I also want to make clear, I do understand what you said earlier about some of the prevention and or intervention contracts may put in their proposals. We're going to do a Safe Passage around this middle school or around this high school. Call it whatever it is, but it's similar to that. And they'll be filling those voids just because they identify that as a strict need in that area, and they're going to be responsible. They're going to take responsibility for implementing it. But there inevitably is likely going to be some areas that are going to say, "What happened? It's gone now."
And it still doesn't fix the fundamental underlying problem, which is we don't have a common definition, we don't
Exactly.
have a common structure, and we don't have a means where it's funded, dedicated.
But
through
for
a dedicated
example,
source.
if a prevention or intervention organization in this proposal process, in this 2008-2009, if they were to go ahead and describe something like that, and your office would say, "Great, that fits just fine," right? But once a definition is had, then in the future, with contracts, and they say, "Well, this is what we're going to do," then we can say, "Well, is this what you're talking about?" And they say, "That's exactly what we're talking about." Then we can hold them accountable to that standard and say, "Since you said this is what you want to do, this is the standard, you're going to adhere yourself to that standard, correct?" And they say, "Yeah," and then you make it part of their contract.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right.
But in the meantime, they're going to be left to do it as best they can without our definition.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have some public comment cards on item number 2. They came in this order: Johnny Godinez, Joe Carmona. We have 3 microphones, and Elder Michael Cumming. Yes,
Good
go
afternoon,
ahead.
Council Member. My name is Johnny Godinez. I'm with SAG Gang Intervention. I just wanted to discuss a little bit about the Safe Passage. I know the mayor's office is working hard with a lot of different partnerships. I work in Boyle Heights community. Last year, we got a subcontract with Bridges 1, which was Centro de Ayuda, that covered Hollenbeck Middle School. And we discovered for many, many years, we were training parents to do the work. A lot of times they cannot be there committed fully. What helped this situation was we were able to hire 2 men that were trained to know the area, intervention specialists, that were able to be in the morning and afternoons. So it was more safer. Even the parents were saying, you know, "How come you're not over here or over there?" But we had a route that we had to take care of, and the route was to help those little young folks to go safely to go get their after-school programs and deal with, doing activities. But we went further than that. We helped prevent guys from getting guns pointed at them, guys from getting, and girls from getting jumped for their iPod, robbed for money, those type of things. We were able to go down the alleyways and see where their empty houses were, where people were going, getting them kicked out of there. And we were the liaison to the middle school. We had radios where we connected with them. They would tell us, there's three guys, gentlemen, walking that area across the street. Can you check them out? And we had that communication. And I think that was very well. One more thing I wanted to discuss. Well, I know all this money is not going to be able to handle everything, but I think we should utilize all of our resources and all the programs that cover around the schools so they could have a safeguard. I've always had this dream to do that, and I believe that we're going to start doing that. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Godinez, you just described a safe passage, your version of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you let Mr. Cummings go?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Councilman, Pastor Mike Cummings, We Care Outreach Ministry, operates Ceasefire Stop the Gang Violence. We actually run a safe passage program for David Starr Jordan High School in the Watts area. We've been there about 3 years. When we first started there, we had anywhere from 10 to 15 robberies a day. Kids was getting a pocket check, iPods, phones, jewelry taken. We came on board there. We're now down to maybe 1 to 2 robberies a month. And we do have records to show that through the Unified School District Police Department that wanted to take the report. I'm explaining to you safe passage for a high school. We are there in the morning from 7 to 9. We make sure that these kids get to and from school down 103rd corridor. Jordan Down Housing Development is right next to Jordan High School. At any given time, we have 10 to 15 gangs out after school. Just a few blocks, the Colonials, Nut Hood, Fushtown, Grave Street, Southside Grave, Peach Gates, 10 Lines. I mean, this is all within a 5 to 10 block radius. And what we do, we on the ground level with them. Certain hot spots. We have a relationship where I went out and signed safe havens with businesses. If a kid was to run into the business, they was to dial 911, or if they need some type of assistance, or call the school or call us. We have that relationship, and we also have a volunteer with the parents. For safe passage, we need a complete wraparound. We need the whole community to get involved with this to make the kids safe. And also with Southeast, with Captain Tangery there, we do have a juvenile car that's there if we need it. They post it after school every day, and along with the Watts Gang Task Force, and that's it. I mean, it's just a good thing. I hate to see it go away because we done built a great relationship there. I just hate to see it go away, you know.
Again, Mr. Cummings, you just described your version of what safe passages is.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Carmona?
Okay, my name is Joe Carmona. I used to work for the LA Unified School District. I am now working with Northeast churches. And I just want to make sure that that what these two men just said is backed up, and we can look deeper into what they're doing. I had the pleasure of working with both of these men, and they both had this knowledge of the gangs around the school, and they both knew the neighborhood. They both were willing to stand up and confront hardcore gang members. I've seen it myself. It's nothing that no one else had told me. I've seen them doing it, and both have a deep conviction to stopping gang violence. They live by that. They live by 24/7. I've seen this myself. What I am concerned. Oh, and by the way, they make sure that the people working underneath them do the job that they have dedicated themselves to do. I always make sure that it would be a travesty if either one of these programs were taken out. And as a matter of fact, like you just said, they should be actually looked at as a model of what can be done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the public comment cards that I have before me. Is anybody else here to make public comment on item number 2? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 2 is now closed. Okay. Thank you. With that, there'll be a recommendation of the chair that we approve the item, and that is item number 2. We now move to item number 1.
Item number 1, continued from June 12, 2008 and June 19, 2008. CDD report response to motion, Cardenas Perry, relative to instructing the CDD to report city contracting requirements as they relate to the closure of LA Bridges 1 and 2 programs, CDD support to facilitate effective program transition, efforts undertaken by the CDD to notify current LA Bridges contractors of the transition, and related matters.
Hi. We did present this report back in July, and happy to report that the transition went as planned. The school district and the contractors were notified in advance. As we prepared the contracts that were ultimately transferred over to the mayor's office for execution. We also developed information for the contractors about transitioning the kids into other programs and doing the closeout of their programs as time went on, and we got closer to December 31st.
Okay. Now, can you give us an example of some of the technical assistance and/or training that CDD provided to the mayor's office?
That was really in the beginning during the contract development phase. There was some concern about from the contractors about invoicing and things like that. But in fact, one of the CDD accountants has transferred to the mayor's office to handle that. So it was pretty well a seamless transition.
Okay. How many contractors are providing services right now when it comes to Bridges 1, Bridges 2?
I'm assuming it's the same 27 that we developed the contracts for. We no longer have any, hands-on relationship with those contracts or the contractors.
Okay. You're familiar with the fact that some of the contractors are in fact servicing the gang reduction zones. Yet at the same time, some of the contractors are servicing outside those zones. As far as you're aware, is there any anticipated impact on some of those contractors when it comes to the future of those kinds of services?
Yeah, I really can't answer that question because I really don't know which ones of them, have been picked up under the previous contract. I know, they talked about an RFP going out today that I'm sure many of these contractors will be responding to.
Are you aware of whether or not any of the contractors are utilizing the youth service transition tracking form?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. What is the current collaboration or contact with the mayor's office in this transition? I know you've
for
described
CDD.
A lot of it happened. Yeah.
Earlier. Yeah. We really don't have a day-to-day contact with the mayor's office on the program. That they are up and running. They have worked closely with our computer services division. They've built a component of the ISIS system for the mayor's office to use to continue tracking not only the participants in bridges but also in the grid zones. And I know that work is ongoing.
Okay. Now, so as far as you know, the information and data relative to the bridges contracts is now fully available to the mayor's office.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
So if the mayor's office, for example, wants to see in a particular community which kids were being serviced by Bridges 1 and Bridges 2, and or what activities were taking place, they could check up on that and then on their own decide how they want to interpret the transition, whether or not it's fluid or not, whether somebody's dropped out of the system, et cetera.
That's right.
Okay, so they have all of that is available to the mayor's office as far as
Yes,
you're
it
aware.
is.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't have any more questions. Thank you. Is there anybody here to speak to item number 1? We're on item number 1 in this committee. I do not see any public comment cards on item number 1. Seeing and hearing no public comment on item number 1. Public comment on item number 1 is now closed. With that, we'll receive and file the CDD report.
Mr. Chair, for clarification on item number 2, there are no recommendations that were submitted by the CCYF, so the committee's action to approve really wouldn't necessarily apply.
Okay. So note and file?
Note and file.
Okay. Thank you. We finished the items on the agenda. Is anybody here for general public comment? Anybody here for general public comment to this committee? Seeing and hearing none, general public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned. Thank you.